Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, taking out a fun and exciting episode for you guys today because Christmas came early for the Sega Dreamcast fans, and that is coming in Nintendo 64 wrapping paper. That is because Starfox 64 has been ported over to Dreamcast and is going to be working on real hardware. I'm going to be showing you different examples on different types of Dreamcast hardware here and going over just how incredible this Starfox 64 port is. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But honestly, Starfox 64 has been seeing a lot of love in 2025 because we obviously have the decomp that's been brought over to PCs, and this port's going to be based on that same decompilation process. So just like everything else, it's got some big decomp energy behind it, and that is always an awesome time. Now do be aware the repo here will say that this does not work on Dreamcast emulation, and for the most part primarily you are going to be watching real hardware captures from real Sega Dreamcast hardware. But I have tested this on emulation, as did Andy D, who helped with one of the captures here, and it seems to work totally fine outside of slightly freezing on the attract sequence here. If you just press start and go into the game, everything else should be totally fine. But right off the top, it is incredible to see Starfox 64 running on something like Dreamcast, and in my experience with this, as well as watching the captures sent in, it looks absolutely stunning. And hilariously, my wife and I are going to be moving to a new house in January, and the day before this release, I decided it doesn't seem to be coming quite yet. I'm going to put my Dreamcast in a box and go ahead and actually package it up, and of course, about 12 hours later, that's when the port comes out, further proving that my timing and understanding of when anything is going to happen is always flawed. But honestly, projects like this, I just love them. Before you go down in the comments and say, why does Dreamcast need a port of Starfox 64? The reality is it definitely doesn't. But like I say in many videos, the only reason you need to do something is because you can. There's going to be a lot of happy Sega Dreamcast fans out there playing Starfox and enjoying the ever-loving hell out of it. Because again, this is a situation where Sega does what Nintendo don't, and all I mean by that is obviously Nintendo didn't port Starfox over to Dreamcast. But I absolutely love the visual clarity here and how it looks on real Dreamcast hardware. You get a really nice approximation of the N64 textures and everything looks really good. But in just a moment, we're going to move over to a different set of Dreamcast hardware that's going to have a completely different look. Because there's more than one ways to get a video signal out of Dreamcast, VGA, HDMI, etc, etc. So you can kind of really articulate your experience here when it comes to real Dreamcast hardware. But I would say, playing around with this myself last night, the controls absolutely transpose over super well to the Dreamcast controller. You basically have all the mappings you need, even if the Dreamcast controller is completely different than the Trident controller on N64. And as far as performance is concerned, this seems to be a lock 60 frames per second the entirety of the gameplay experience. Let's move over to another capture on HDMI in Dreamcast, and you're going to see still original hardware, but a completely different look and a completely different vibe. And that's because both Andy D as well as Kilter Music helped me on the captures on this one, because I knew they had different hardware available to test out, and I figured it would be fun to kind of exhibit just how different sources can be when you have the exact same hardware. But J.N. Martin, the porter of this, as well as Falco Gurgis, who I'm sure provided support because he does on basically every Dreamcast project, have absolutely just done an incredible job of bringing over the totality of Starfox 64 to brand new hardware. And that is a ton of fun because these decomp projects we talk about on the channel, they don't just end up as PC ports, they don't just end up as static recomps on PC. When you have the code decompiled, you can port it over to any hardware that can support it. Now moving back over to a way more analog feeling source from real Dreamcast hardware, again, this is just how good it looks. It runs smoother than N64, and it really is fun to have this on a console. Because don't get me wrong, the PC ports and the static recomps of the actual N64 games are a lot of fun. There's something special about turning on a console, holding the controller in your hand, and basically playing Starfox 64 on a system it never actually came out for. Where we're going to move into the first soundtrack sample here, 45 seconds or so, but don't go anywhere because I'm going to show you how it works on software emulation as well, even if the actual GitHub repo says it doesn't function, because in my experience it seems to be perfectly fine. I'm sure it's just one of those things that's meant for real hardware, so the easiest thing to say is it only works on real hardware. But enjoy!
Use the boost to get through! Incoming message from Rod 64!
Location confirmed. Sending supplies.
Watch out, Fox! They're on me! I'm getting careless! Thanks, Fox.
So I mean, that sounds exactly like Starfox 64 should, from the soundtrack to the sound effects to the voice samples, and it is all being transposed over to Dreamcast super well. And the reality of the situation is, even if Dreamcast is clearly much more powerful hardware than N64, that doesn't mean that it's going to run perfectly or sound perfectly. It still takes a lot of configuration of the code, basically melding it over to what the Dreamcast hardware expects code-wise for it to actually be able to work this well. So it's one of those things, just because hardware is more powerful doesn't mean it's quote-unquote free to be able to port a game. I can't imagine how many hundreds of hours have to go into something like this to actually bring it to fans. And again, it's not like you have to pay for this thing. It is absolutely free. Now I understand that it's going to be a little bit difficult to actually build the repo on GitHub, but I'm pretty sure if you know some sites out there, you'll probably find this thing pre-built relatively soon. But if you do have a system set up so you can actually build different GitHub repos, it shouldn't be too hard whatsoever. And you'll see here as we move over to the other Dreamcast source on HDMI, again, two different vibes, completely different and completely amazing. But you leave me a comment down below and you tell me which one you like better. Do you like more of the soft analog vibe Dreamcast, or do you like more of the actual crystal clear HDMI out? For me, honestly, it's kind of a tie, just depending on how you want to play it, but I'm sure people are going to have some opinions out there as to which one they like better. But let's move over to actual emulation of Dreamcast on Flycast, and you will see here anything with emulations is going to have the frame counter in the corner just so I can actually differentiate it. And it's definitely going to have a lot of enhancements on compared to real Dreamcast hardware as well. And again, even if the GitHub repo says it doesn't work, this is definitely something in my experience playing around with it again right before I did this voiceover. I had no issues with it whatsoever. So if you want to play Starfox 64 on Dreamcast and you don't actually have Dreamcast hardware, you can pop over to something like Redream or Flycast and have a pretty decent time of it. But if it does freeze or there's any issues, don't open up a GitHub ticket to the actual developer, because it was never intended to do this. So we kind of have to respect that opinion of saying it doesn't work on emulation, even if in my testing it clearly does work on emulation. But it's definitely going to be a better experience on real hardware, because again, you can get an intro freeze, but that can actually happen on real hardware as well. So I'm sure you might see a Rev 2 here. If for any reason you're playing Starfox 64 on real Dreamcast hardware and it does freeze up at the intro, just go ahead and hit start. Before the freeze happens, you'll be into the game and there won't be any issues otherwise. And now that the frame counter is missing, we are back to original hardware again. And from the kind of fog effect, how everything kind of fades into the camera, looks absolutely stunning across Dreamcast. And again, because the hardware is more powerful, you're just going to get a better, faster experience, just like you would on the PC port or the recomp that you're playing on a Windows machine. And that is just obvious because Dreamcast has more horsepower and N64 would always drop frames back in the day. But this is just a fun project. It makes me think that every single N64 decomp at some point in time is probably going to come to Dreamcast. So leave me a comment down below and you tell me what's the one decompiled N64 game you'd love to see ported to Dreamcast more than any other. For me, I would definitely love to see one of the Zeldas come over. I think that would just be absolutely a wild experience. But another soundtrack sample, 45 seconds, and I'll be right back with a lot more Starfox on Dreamcast.
What the heck? There's one more to go. I can't move. I'll take care of the bomb now.
Again, just sounds exactly like Starfox should, but moving over to the lava stage here, my favorite in the entirety of Starfox 64, because it always reminds me of Solar Assault by Konami in the arcades. This was a level on real N64 hardware that definitely felt like it was kind of chugging here and there, and it is something that's going to be vastly improved on Dreamcast. But again, what I really love about this port is the fact that it runs on a console. Again, I love all the PC ports, I love all the static recomps, but being able to load up an image either on an optical disc emulator or on a CDR on your real Dreamcast, hitting the power button, and suddenly Starfox 64 playing, absolutely a vibe that I am there for. It kind of feels the same way of playing Super Mario 64 on PlayStation 1, which I just showed you guys on the channel maybe a couple weeks ago. But but this game, which is always special, I remember having it back in the day when I first got it on N64, falling in love with it, and I still think it holds up as the best Star Fox game ever made. Because even though the Star Fox game on Wii U could be fun, it definitely had a little jank around the edges, and it's something that I hope Nintendo remembers exists as a franchise. Sure, we just got Metroid Prime 4, but I want to see a Star Fox 128 for lack of a better title for it. But one more soundtrack sample, because again, the music quality in this port is absolutely outstanding, and this is my favorite music track in the game, and I'll be right back with just a bit more Star Fox.
Location confirmed. Sending supplies.
Major, buddy, go away! Good riddance. I almost got burned.
So there you have it. Star Fox 64 has been fully ported over to the Sega Dreamcast. You can burn yourself a disc, you can pop it on a mode, you can pop it on a GDMU, you can pop it on whatever it is you want, but you definitely have to play this game because it absolutely is outstanding. And again, if you don't own real Dreamcast hardware, I've tested it under emulation, and indeed tested it under emulation. It seems to work perfectly fine as well. But if there's any late game bugs or issues and it does freeze up, just remember that it is targeting real hardware, so it could inherently have a few issues in emulation, just haven't seen yet. But honestly, I love stuff like this. We got a brand new Sega Dreamcast game in December, and that is what Video Game Esoterica wants under his Christmas tree, unless Dreamcast 2 ever becomes a thing one day. And we all know Sega's never going back to the hardware game, but it doesn't mean I can't dream. But short of that, if you want to play this one, the GitHub link is down below, and if you guys need a tutorial on how to actually build GitHub projects in the future, leave me a comment down in the comment section, maybe in January. I will spend some time to do that. But Star Fox 64 is here on Dreamcast. It's a 10 out of 10 effort, and I absolutely love it. But short of that, we are done. Hope you guys are enjoying the December season so far, and tell me what you want for Christmas. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.